thanks a lot. And yeah, first of all, thanks a lot having me here on stage and having the opportunity to speak to you. Also, thanks for your interest in this. You said without highest level of security and compliance, and I hope this was not what you want to say. Of course, we want to have the highest level of security and compliance in the cloud. That's very important. Without sacrificing, that's good. My name is Tüffers. I'm working at the Deutsche Börse since 2016. Does that work? Oh yeah. I'm actually kind of the co-founder of the Cloud Center of Excellence at Deutsche Börse. Before that, a long time with Accenture. I'm in the public cloud area already since 2010. This is always dropping on off. Is that okay from sound? Okay. And now really having the opportunity to drive the Deutsche Börse into the public cloud. Now, many of you might know the Deutsche Börse, of course, if you still watch traditional television, shortly before 8, you have this Börse before 8 stuff, and you still see in the background the traditional floor trading. That's, to be honest, only kind of folklore, I would say, because all of the trading today is, of course, fully digitalized. We, as Deutsche Börse, see ourselves as a market infrastructure provider. This is what we do. So we provide the markets. The most known ones are Xetra, which is for the securities trading, Eurex, which is for the derivatives trading, but we also operate the largest European energy exchange, for example, with IPEX and AEX. We also have the largest gas market, so a lot of different trading venues, foreign exchanges, and so on. Trading is at the core of our business, but we also have what we call pre-trade and post-trade to have really an end-to-end value chain. Pre-trade means we want to give our customers all the information they need to have in order to make their trading strategies. And this is a lot about data analytics, having access to real-time data, having access also to pre-calculated indices. The DAX is the most known index, of course, but we calculate over 7,000 indices in real time, all the time. And then we have this area of post-trade, everything which comes after actually the trading has happened. About settlement, this is about custody, this is about value-added services we provide to our customers, around fund services, about liquidity management, collateral management. And everything is powered by IT. So as you can imagine, a trading venue is not kind of a common business. There's not that many trading venues in the world. So most of the applications are custom built. So not this kind of software packages which you can buy from the market. So we are a heavy IT company. And with that, of course, cloud was for us also a super important piece to look at. And obviously in the beginning, we started like many people looking at it more from the agility, but also cost perspective. Interesting enough, also quality. There's a nice example which I tell a little bit later on. But I think what we see also is, for us, cloud is the basis for innovation topics. And if you look back at the value chain which we had, so the trading, the pre and the post-trade, the growth, what we are currently doing is not necessarily in the trading part, because the trading is a fixed business from this perspective. Where we at the moment grow a lot by acquisitions, for example, and if you follow a little bit the news, there's again a public offer out there to take over another company, is a lot in this pre-trade and this post-trade. And this is a lot about data and analytics. So for example, enriching what we can give to the clients, enriching that with a machine learning information, or having a strong analytics platform where the customers directly can access our feeds and conduct analytics on the fly. This is super powerful. Same is also then, of course, for the post-trade, if you have services, things like fraud detection, tax services, whatever, liquidity management. If you can power that again with AI and machine learning, can again be very powerful. Then, of course, hot topic at the moment, digital assets, blockchain. So a lot of innovation area or things at the moment is really happening about tokenization of assets, and really start having a digital as a trading venue, for example. Deutsche Börse will not close their data center, so we are not going all in. Again, if you see the value chain, the core trading part today, still from a technology perspective, is not yet possible to put it in the cloud. So we require a latency which so far cannot be matched by the cloud service providers. We are always in a very close collaboration with them because they like technology changes and challenges. But at the moment, still, there's still some kind of significant difference what we would require them in order to be able to run, for example, something like Cetra in a public cloud. Having said that, what we use is, for example, the cloud for the testing. So especially for our flagship trading platform, we spin up every night hundreds of instances using Spot instance to run any kind of random tests to really ensure the quality of the system. So quality has become an important driver for cloud adoption for us as well. I think, like I already mentioned also this morning, we are, I guess, pretty similar like many other companies in adopting the public cloud journey. So we really started 2016 onboarding the first cloud service provider. Obviously, in IT, the benefit of cloud was pretty quickly visible. So a lot of developers spinning up development test instances there. We adopted then additional hyperscalers. So today we have all three US-based hyperscalers in our portfolio. We, from the beginning, put a strong emphasis on infrastructure as code, first with the cloud-native flavors, but then also Terraform open source in order to create landing zone concepts for them to follow. And then we followed the normal stuff. So we started then with production workload. The first really bigger milestone was for us to have material workload in the cloud. Material means for us, I mean, we are a highly regulated business and we are under CRITIS, for example, critical infrastructure. And to really push something out which is part of a core business process requires a lot of approvals inside the company, but also close collaboration with our regulators. So it was less a technical challenge, but more a process challenge in order to establish this process, to get approvals by everyone, to understand how we can notify regulators and so on. And lately, we have then also announced, end of last year, strategic partnership with Google. So this will be now our main cloud service provider going forward, where then a lot of also the innovation topics will be put on. So we were not getting rid of the multi-cloud strategy. We will be still multi-cloud. We need to, also for regulatory purposes, to have an exit strategy, for example. But our strategic partner going forward will be Google. One interesting concept here, I mean, a lot of topics here are around security and compliance. One thing which is also not technical, but which helped us a lot to be where we are today is the collaborative cloud audit group. This is something which we initiated in 2017, the first time. When we spoke with our regulators, said, look, we want to make use of public cloud, US-based hyperscalers. They were, of course, skeptical, but they were not negative about it. Yeah, they were really supportive. But at the end of the day, they said, whatever you do, you need to stay in control. You need to have full control of the outsourcing chain, which means also you need to have an unrestricted right to audit and also execute that unrestricted right to audit. You can imagine when we then the first time went to an American hyperscaler, look guys, we want to conduct a full-fledged audit to you. That was not really compatible with their culture, I would say. So we had in-depth discussions, workshops with the cloud service providers, with our regulator, and we created this concept, which at the end of the day means we founded a group of finance institutes here in Germany. In the meantime, also Netherlands, Italy, and Spanish banks have also joined to conduct joint audits on the cloud service providers. This also helps us because we are a pretty small institute. And if we have to audit someone like AWS or Microsoft, the audit scope would be far too big for us. So now, in this collaborative audit group, we have over 40 finance institutes in there, and they're running really on a yearly basis. They conduct audits with all the three hyperscalers. And as everyone is participating and is taking over certain control domains, we can have really a full-fledged audit. And so we really demonstrate also to our regulator that we are here in control. Which is not so nice for me at the end of the day, because me as a cloud center of excellence, I'm then the first line of defense. Yeah, so I inherit then all the findings into my team. So I have then to chase the cloud service providers to get that fixed, whatever we find. but at the end of the day, it works really, really nice. So you see already, regulatory requirements is a big topic for us. As mentioned already, we are part of the critical infrastructure. We are under very close scrutiny or observation, especially by the BaFin, because we own banking licenses in Germany with our Clearstream bank, but also with our Eurex clearing. We are also having the Luxembourg regulator, which is the CSSF, because we operate Clearstream in Luxembourg. And then everything is under this European Banking Authority, EBA authority. This is only a small set. There's more. We also have the MAS in Singapore. We have the FINMA in Switzerland. We have the Hessische Börsenaufsicht, the Sächsische Börsenaufsicht. So a lot of different regulators which we have to somehow satisfy. So if you look at their requirements, then combine it with the common industry frameworks which you have out there. For a long time, we focused a lot on the ISO 27000. Now we are moving more to CCM because that's more compatible what the cloud service providers have as well. Then together with our organization specific, this is defining our cloud control framework. And in this cloud control framework, you have always these two aspects. There's the security and compliance of the cloud, which is in the responsibility of the cloud service provider, and where we have now, with the collaborative cloud audit group, also a good vehicle to monitor that on top of the reports they are providing, of course, on a regular basis. And then the second part is all the right parts on the right, which is about the security and compliance in the cloud. So what we are doing in the cloud, where we are responsible for. And this means, of course, that we have to bake in cloud into all the normal day-to-day IT operations on one side. That, of course, on the other side, we have to develop the platforms with the corresponding policy configurations, for example. But then, and this is the focus here, is also to have a standardized way of how we want to deploy into the cloud, how we want to do DevSecOps. And this has then defined or has been translated in what we call the cloud control plane. And this is a little bit the flow of from the left to the right, so from change over then at the end of the day to run. And this is all what we would like, or what we already provide to all the different people. So there will be infrastructure as cloud blueprints. There's base images, which we are providing as part of our image bakery. There's reference architectures. And then, of course, there's the important part, which was already alluded to, the policy as code. So this is all happening before actually something gets deployed. Then the deployment itself is happening, where a lot of security topics are, of course, covered. And then you have whatever comes afterwards with, for example, drift detection, logging audit, monitoring our cloud estate with the CNAP solution, for example, and so on. And everything is then supported by a common observability layer. It's not everything is in place today at Deutsche Börse. We are working on it, but we are getting better and better, I would say. And this is a little bit different viewpoint, but it's alluding to what also Dave mentioned before. It's really leveraging up the maturity of cloud adoption. So I would say similar like many, we started a little bit blue-ish in the cloud adoption. Of course, everyone still wants to first get traction into the cloud, wants to learn things. On one side, then also cloud service providers have adopted certain things, how they handle, for example, networks in the cloud, how they handle identity and access management in the cloud. But also new services are coming out in the security domain, but also things like Terraform, Enterprise, for example. And this has really driven the notion that we also from a cloud center of excellence have to change. Where in the past, we were merely a provider of giving cloud access to the different teams and making sure everyone can jump into the cloud and start developing and testing and putting workloads in there. Now it's really about having a platform view. Yeah? So really having platforms for change, kind of a standardized delivery factory, standardized delivery vehicles, a standardized tool set, but then also in the different areas of infrastructure service, platform as a service, also moving into a much more platform approach. And this is pretty much in place. What we are working now on is also that in the next step, we also want to have a centralized platform for dealing with the recovery situations. Today, we still leave it for the individual applications to decide on their backup and recovery strategy. But going forward, I think it become pretty obvious that this does not make too much sense, because if then one application is falling over to one region, the other one to the other region, and then afterwards we are not able to connect back each other, it makes much more sense to have this also as a centralized vehicle. So, when we started with the partnership with Google, this was also for us an opportunity now to change a little the rules of playing in the cloud. On one side, because now we have a large transformational program which has been set up as part of this partnership. Now also, I would say the awareness in security and compliance is much different than it was a couple of years ago, where in the beginning, I think many of you might know it, cloud was a little bit seen as a playground for IT, for developers. And now, of course, there's a broad interest to really have this on the highest level of security and compliance. And this is where we then also said from the beginning, okay, whatever in the future goes into the cloud has to go via standardized tool chain, which in our case here means we put in here for Terraform Enterprise, because, and you are the experts, of course, you know it, for us, it has really the large advantage that we can have already at that point in time a policy check. So before the things actually reach the cloud, we can already check if certain rules are fulfilled. As you might know, once it's in the cloud and you want to change things, you have to run behind the people. So of course, you can always threaten, look guys, if you don't do it, we turn down your machine, or we put a deny policy on top or whatever. But then if you really want to do it in production, and then you want to be called at night if there's an incident, So we had some tough discussions on these topics. Yeah? So at the end of the day, it's much better to prevent it already before it reaches the cloud. And this is what really Sentinel policies helps us now to do. Yeah? So a lot of development effort is now going into the development of these policies. I think the other big topic, and we saw that also mentioned by Dave before, is for us, when you are dealing, and we have some history in the cloud, you have a history of service accounts, service principles, and all this kind of stuff, and it's pretty messy, especially when you were not very strict at the beginning to have really tight control how you manage this stuff. Now it's getting better because also the tooling is getting better. You can onboard them in a lot of tools, but having things like HashiCorp Vault in place from the beginning would have saved us a lot of headache, I would say. Where today we have legacy in the cloud at the end of the day. It's like this. And then really super nice is drift detection, because the other, and we have very often regulators with us, and I sit really also then in meetings with them, have to explain how asset management works in the cloud and so on. And something they really like is what they call in German, the Soll-Ist-Abgleich. I tried to translate it into English. It's pretty difficult, but it's, I'm not sure if there's an exact notion of it, but at the end of the day, to compare what you would like to have versus the reality. And this is for them a fundamental principle. If you can demonstrate to them that you have a working Soll-Ist-Abgleich, a lot of the topics are already smoothed out with the regulators. And drift detection is, for me, the answer to that. So drift detection really allows me now, here's the code, here's the Soll, this is how it should be, there's how it is, the reality in the cloud, and drift detection will exactly show me if there's any deviation. So this is really, for us, super nice feature. For the policies, there's, of course, different flavors you can use. Our focus at the moment is mainly on 1 and 4. So 1 is really about making sure that the infrastructure and services we provide in the cloud are following certain standards and definitions or security baselines at the end of the day. And 4 is, for example, where we would try to codify certain regulatory policies. The most simple ones is, for example, that certain applications can only live in the EU, for example, for data residency purposes. This is at the moment the focus. Of course, there can be more, and especially I would say in the future, 5 could be interesting when we start going more into this FinOps practices to make sure that also whatever is provisioned there is also then fitting from a cost perspective, for example. Having policies as code is obviously a super benefit. In the previous or in the past, what happens is policies are written as Word documents, are written in Excel files, and it's very cumbersome also for the people to understand what's meant with the policies, how to translate it into code, and also how to check if you're compliant or not, right? So this is for me the biggest benefit for policy as code is that I have this also in GitHub. It's public, available for everyone. There's a clear process of who is allowed to change these policies. You have also clear version control in there. And everyone has access and can just download these policies or play or run their stuff against it. I already mentioned temporary credentials, super nice, and I think this is really the future and I really love the announcements of today, having, for example, also then Vault as a managed system where you have then really only these secrets in there without running the Vault infrastructure. I think that's super key. I don't want to have this hassle with all the credentials because we as a platform, we are at the end of the day getting called up if there's a credential exposure or not. It always comes down to the Cloud Center of Excellence. Hey guys, what did you do? What mess did you create? This is for me also super important. For the drift detection, one thing is what we also decided then to do is whenever there is a drift, you have of course to decide what do you do with this. Sometimes there can be a good reason for it because perhaps there was an incident and someone didn't have the time to go through the full chain, had just to make some changes in production. All fine, but whatever we do, whenever there is a drift, in the first case, it's creating a security incident. And so it's then up with the SOC CERT team to then chase, and probably then it can be solved. But with this approach, it's always ensured that nothing gets at the end of the day undetected. There's a clear process behind. And there's also a clear process then if someone has an incident and he fights this incident afterwards to get it back into the normal development cycle. I think what's super important is from the beginning is training and communications. I mean, we had a lot of Terraform skills already in the companies. A lot of teams were already adopting Terraform open source, but there's still, I would say, a shift to go then also to move to Terraform Enterprise, for example. So, and there you have then to take everyone with you. Also, there are other tools out there, of course. I mean, people also like to use other tools. And when we made this announcement that, sorry guys, you have to stop now, then you have to, of course, offer a lot of training to them to get them onboarded as well. Standardize the workflow. We had intense discussions, what's the best branching strategy, the best workspace approach, and so on. And at the end of the day, it's important to not give too much choices here because otherwise you end up again in a hassle of different options and setup configurations, what you at the end of the day you don't want. And I see some smiling here, I guess a lot of similar experiences. I work with Lighthouse application teams, that's always important of course. And we put a lot of emphasis in making sure that the platform itself is super robust. We still use Enterprise today, so we have Terraform Enterprise and Vault Enterprise. We are thinking now about having a parallel track, purely SaaS-based. For the reasoning is that on one side we have the super highly regulated stuff, which is then covered by the enterprise stuff, but we have a lot of acquisitions, a lot of smaller companies which are pretty independent from the IT perspective. So they're not integrated into our networks, for example, and I would say identity and access management integration is also not so super. And here we are really thinking about onboarding them on a cloud-based chain. And with that, then having then still the opportunity to leverage the same set of policies, for example, leverage the same approach for everyone, but having them a little bit more, giving them a little bit more freedom on the other hand. And I think what's important is to have central capacity here available to help onboarding. So you cannot just set up the platform and then tell the teams, okay, now you're off you go. So we really established a core team with Accenture in this case, which is then also always there and helping us in onboarding all the different product IT teams. this is where we are today, and of course we're still, there's always things we can improve on. So there's a couple of things also on the automation of drift detection, and it has been just recently put live now. We have this with the SOC CERT team now, but there's more automation we would like to do also, for example, identifying the asset owners, identifying the right support teams and so on. Then of course we are still continuing to roll this out into our organization, so have really all the different teams of all the different areas onboarded on this one. And we are still thinking about having additional features in there, like image scanning, for example. So a couple of things where we can still improve. This is where we are today. And I think it's exciting times, and yeah, we are pretty well on our cloud journey, and always looking forward for the next steps. Thanks.
I think we can allow a few questions, one or two, before we go into the lunch break. So
that's already the first one.
Yeah, so you say you're quite strong on speed, but also some other stuff. So how is your balancing of multi-cloud enablement? You go third-party tools, you still want to use some cloud-native capabilities, but what is your vision on being open enough for potential vendor changes in the future, but also simple enough on not having to completely reinvent the wheel or being too locked in whatever?
So to repeat the question, so it's a little bit how do we balance the multi-cloud, and how we still have the balance also to cloud-native tooling, for example. At the moment, I would say all three clouds are pretty equal. I mean, we have this announcement with Google just recently, so we are now pushing strong into Google, but so far it was pretty even, I would say. And for me, especially, I would love to make this control plane around this cloud platforms. Yeah? So then I can have Google in there, I can have Microsoft in there, I can have AWS in there. When I have this shift left and standardized tool set for everyone on one side, and on the other side, everything feeds into, for example, a common security posture, security monitoring solution, or into a cloud-based, SaaS-based SIEM solution. Then on the other side, I'm capturing also against everything. And then if I have this, then in the middle, I can be more flexible, and I can also exchange. Then people can also have their own GCP organization, they can have their own Azure tenant or whatever, as long as they follow the other principles. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so you said you're multi-cloud, and you also have something in your own DCs, right?
Yes.
And I heard that Buffin is somehow sensitive about not having everything in one configuration management database. So how do you handle this, like feeding everything into one CMDB?
Did you say they don't want it in one single central?
No, they're very
they
sensitive.
Want it.
Yeah,
they
want
exactly.
it.
Yeah,
so
that's correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, that's true. So what we have is a central configuration asset management database. And at the moment we are, and it has been a long discussion and quite some development effort, but we are feeding event-driven all the information, whatever happens in the cloud, into a central configuration management system. I'm not such a big fan of it, and I would love to have a more cloud-native approach going forward, perhaps. But at the moment, at least this satisfies the requirement. And now, let's say, once we have satisfied the requirements, ticked some boxes, now we have time to think a little bit more strategic what we want to do. Because I do think that leveraging what the cloud providers have as asset management solutions might be also a good option going forward, at least.
Yeah, so these are a lot of services you offer. How do you offer these services to your application teams? Do you have any kind of portals offering them, like Backstage or something else, that they can use these capabilities of the platform?
No, not so much, actually. So, I mean, we of course have the normal communication channels, pretty standard, like, I don't know, SharePoint, Teams channels or whatever. But at the end of the day, what the teams can do in the cloud is pretty much up to them. So we don't offer them a service catalog where they can order a machine or whatever. What we offered them is, in that case, they have access to Terraform Enterprise with a private model registry, for example, where then the modules are in for storage bucket or whatever. And this is in a service catalog for the things they can do in the cloud. But it's not like, and we don't want that whoever wants to do something in the cloud has to come via us, because then we would be a super bottleneck at the end of the day. So they should have certain freedoms. They can also develop their own modules, of course. Then we do some sanity checking, but at the end of the day, they have the possibility to also develop their solutions in a way freely. There is a service whitelist, of course. We're not allowing all services depending on the application criticality. So there is some kind of a risk assessment which we do. What kind of encryption is supported? Is it a global, local service, whatever? So typical things. But that's it.
Okay, last question.
First of all, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. You are working in a very regulated market, and I can imagine enabling cloud services in such market is a bit of moving the mountains a meter to the left. You mentioned the, if I remember right, collaborative audit group. Could you explain a bit more how that works and how you have that enabled in getting the regulatory parts really on board?
At the end of the day, it's really, this was really a major achievement at the end of the day. And it's a win-win-win situation. On one side, for the cloud service providers, because not 40 finance institutes are knocking on the door, hey, guys, we want to have an audit with you. On the other side, for us, because as mentioned, I mean, we, from a sizing perspective, I mean, okay, we have also quite some auditors, but they're also occupied with other audits. And we cannot send them all to audit the cloud service providers, which are super large. And a third also for the regulator itself. So the regulator, like a BaFin, has also a high interest of having a consistent view. Not if we do an audit with Microsoft and Deutsche Bank is doing an audit and it would be completely perhaps not in sync, it does not really help. So we really organized this kind of workshop with the regulator, with the cloud service provider, with the finance institutes to come up with this concept. And now as there's really a natural interest for every finance institutes, because you are obliged to execute this and to do this. You have to do it. This is self-running. So there's always a chair, and I think it's changing every year, which finance institute is sitting on top. And then there's always a question, okay, which finance institutes want to participate, for example, in the Google audit, who wants to participate in the AWS audit? They find together. They define the audit scope. They, in the meantime, also defined a common methodology. That's very important because I think for auditors, similar like architects, you put 3 in a room and everyone has a different view of what they want to do and how they do it. But they agreed on a common approach. And since then, this is really, and also the cloud service providers get used to it. So it's really a common process now. So every year, there's an AWS audit, there's a Google audit, there's a Microsoft audit. There can be also audits for additional ones if there's sufficient interest. If someone wants to audit Oracle Cloud or IBM Cloud and there's sufficient participants in there, this is all covered in this framework. And as mentioned, there's in the meantime, I think about 50 institutes and all the big banks are in there.
Christian, many, many thanks for all those insights that you shared with us. I think super interesting. So
Welcome.
big round of applause for Christian, please.
Thanks.